zone, but I promise. Okay. Here we go. So welcome to the very first class of Shar HaBitachon, the Gate of Trust. We all know as a Jew that the secret to our survival lies in our unique connection to Hashem. There are thousands of stories of people in our history that are chock full of saintly and simple individuals displaying superhuman characteristics in terms of restraint, calm, inner peace, selflessness. We could think of just a few stories that come to mind: Abraham in the fiery furnace, Daniel in the lion's den. A little bit closer to our reality, Jews in the Inquisition, Jews living in communist Russia. All of Jewish reality is simply beyond belief. Now, every society has a set of beliefs that they buy into. But the depth of our personal connection to Hashem can bring us to an entirely new reality. There's a story told of a chassid who went on a business trip, and he came back to find that his entire home had been burnt to a crisp. Nothing left. And he approaches his home, and the people of the town gather around, and he starts to say a blessing. The people expected that he was going to say a blessing, one that we say when unfortunately we hear the news of a death of somebody, and we say, Baruch Dayan Ha'emes, blessed is the true judge. And we say this to verbally affirm that we trust what Hashem is doing. Interesting to note, sidebar, we don't use the name of Hashem in this blessing because we don't want to take the chance to say Hashem's name in vain. And we all know, some of us more than others, when somebody very close to you passes away, the last thing you're going to do is bless God. And so the name of Hashem is taken out of that blessing. It's just Baruch Dayan Ha'emes. And this chassid is standing there, and his home is burnt to a crisp. And they're expecting that that's the blessing he's going to make. But he doesn't. Instead, he makes a blessing thanking Hashem for making me a Jew. Why? Because the special connection that we have to Hashem is what allows us to survive. The best way I found to understand this and describe this, or even to express this, is through a song. It's a fairly new song. It addresses COVID and otherwise. I'll share my screen. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. I'm new at this. We'll try. You'll let me know. Okay, here we go.
I see it, but I don't hear it.
Okay, hold on one second. Does anybody hear it?
No.
The Hebrew word for this little extra something that we have as a Jew is bitachon. It's translated as trust, but it also means security and certainty, confidence and reliability. And a person who wants to always stay calm and relaxed and focused and live their very best self as an authentic Jew is going to try to live with this ingredient of bitachon. This work, The Shar HaBitachon was written in the 11th century by Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekuda. He was a leader in the Iberian Peninsula, and the original work was written in Arabic. It was only translated about a century later. It's part of a much larger work called the Chovos Halavavos, the Duties of the Heart, which is comprised of 10 gates or 10 sections, if you will. One is on the unity of God, one's on the reflection of God, one is on serving God, and now we're at the fourth gate, which is Shar HaBitachon, trusting in God. Throughout the Rebbe's leadership, whenever there were Hasidim or Jewish people writing to the Rebbe about their struggles with faith in God, the Rebbe would often point them to study this particular gate in the duties of the heart, in the Chovos Halavavos, gate number 4, the gate of our trust, Shar HaBitachon. In fact, there's one letter where the Rebbe actually told somebody to study it, but not to study it all at once, to study it slowly over a few weeks and in the course of a few weeks. So that's why we built the structure of this class this way. We're going to take it in bite-sized pieces and see what we could internalize and apply to our lives. Now, we have many scholarly works of the Torah. What was missing that Rabbeinu Bachya decided he needed to write this work? What was he contributing to the world of Jewish literacy or scholarship that necessitated that he should write this work? And what he said was, he realized that the bulk of our obligations as a Jew are associated with an action. We light Shabbos candles, we put on tefillin, we give tzedakah, we visit the sick. And so most of our holy books are books that instruct us on these very physical actions. But the Torah also tells us what we should believe and what our thought processes should be and our emotions. But they're very often overshadowed by the mitzvahs that we are commanded to do. And in part for good reason. We all know ha'maaseh hu ha'ikar. It's the action that counts. So it kind of makes sense that the bulk of our holy works talk about actually doing the practical mitzvahs. But he noticed that there was a gap, and there wasn't a work that was devoted to the duties of the heart. He looked at all those action mitzvahs as duty of the limbs, and then all the thought processes, emotions, and our way of looking at the world as duties of the heart. And he felt that if they weren't presented properly to the Jewish people, we're going to miss out on key inspiration and the focus of what should be driving every single mitzvah. And that's why he wrote this entire work, Chovos Halavavos, which includes in it this number 4. Now, before we're going to go into it, I reassured most of you that you don't need the book for this class, because we're going to lay the groundwork and provide a framework of what we're going to be studying now and what our approach is going to be. So now we know we're studying a work that deals with primarily the thought processes, the emotions of a Jew, the belief system of a Jew. Now, it's important to know that this particular book is not going to address belief. It's not even going to address prayer, because Rabbeinu Bachya is assuming that the person that's studying this is already at the point where they established key facts. So the person studying this already believes there's a God. So this book assumes we believe in God. This book takes it as a given that we believe in the concept of divine providence, that God oversees everything that's happening in this world, to every single thing that exists within the world at any given moment. Further, We believe that Hashem cares about us. The fourth belief that we're going into as a baseline before we even get into this whole intellectual exercise, we believe that Hashem is passionate. And the fifth thing that we have as a baseline is that we understand that it's our job to serve Hashem. So when we're starting to learn this, Hashem is already in our consciousness. It's part of our lives. We're God-fearing Jews. We know Hashem cares about us. None of that is what we're discussing. Like we started the class, we have deeper questions. And that's what we're going to be addressing. God is already up front and center in our lives. But this gate of trust is going to teach us how to harness the tools we already have to strengthen our bitachon, particularly our trust. Because the stronger our bitachon is, the less anxiety we're going to have, the less worry we're going to have. And believe it or not, we're going to be experiencing many more blessings in our lives. In this work, studying this, and this already answers one of the questions that was brought up before the start of the class, when we're going to be plowing through this work, we're going to be training ourselves to let go of our limited and subjective understanding for the all-knowing, all-encompassing Hashem. And the goal of this course is to forge an even deeper connection, both with Hashem, but with a tangible result. So in deepening our bond with Hashem and our trust with Hashem, but also that it should translate into real and tangible blessings that we as human beings could appreciate. For the same reason, when we're going to be going through this, we're going to see that prayer isn't included here. Because a person of trust, a person that believes in Hashem is already praying. Guess what? It's a mitzvah to pray 3 times a day. So this person is praying. We're not going to be talking about that now. Instead, we are going to be reminding ourselves that we are instructed to use the mundane tools of the world to look for employment and to master a craft and to use those things to strengthen our relationship with Hashem. We are going to be coming to a realization and an understanding that Hashem created a physical world and us as his partners to play a crucial role. We know that Hashem could choose to sustain us with no effort on our part. He could just take care of us. He could shower us with the manna in the desert like he did to the Jews. We don't really have to do anything. But we also know that that's not our purpose. That's not what Hashem wants from us. Reminds me of a story of this daughter that brings her fiance, wants him to meet her parents. And so he comes for dinner and everybody's very impressed. The mom and the dad, everybody's very impressed with the new son-in-law to be. And the father invites him out to smoke a cigar on the patio to kind of feel him out a little bit. And they go outside and they're talking for a little while. They come back. The young man goes out with his fiance to be. And the future mother-in-law looks at her husband and says, "No. What do you say? What kind of guy is he?" She says, "What could I tell you? The guy thinks I'm God." She says, "What? What do you mean?" He says, "I asked him, where are you going to live?" He says, "God will provide." I ask him, "Where are you going to work?" And he says, "God will provide." And I ask him, "How do you think you're going to support my daughter and eventually your family?" And he smiled and he said, "God will provide." Obviously, he thinks I'm God. So it's a funny story, but the truth is when we're in this world, we're in this world and we're given material objects and tools and talents and capabilities because Hashem wants us to work within the world. He wants us to use those things. He could have just given us everything on a simple platter. He didn't. He wants us to partner with him. And not only doesn't the physical things contradict what Hashem wants, but he wants us to use it as a medium through which our deep trust of Hashem is displayed. The Baal Shem Tov, who lived, I want to say 1600s maybe, I think so. We'll go to that story later. But there's a story of a rabbi, Rev Avram Heschel, of Opatov, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, Poland. And word got to him that there was a certain innkeeper named Psachia that was doling out blessings to people, and they were coming true. And so there were murmurings around the community, oh, he's one of the 36 hidden tzaddikim, and he's this, amazing mystical person. And so this Reb Avram Heschel wanted to go find out for himself. So he disguises himself so that the guy shouldn't know who he is. And he sits in the corner of the inn and he's observing. And he sees people go and they pay him. And as soon as he gets the money, he turns to the wall and he sticks the money through a crack in the wall. And once in a while, people ask Psachia for a blessing, and he smiles and he gives them a blessing and carries on. And he's sitting and watching the comings and goings of everybody, and it seems perfectly normal, and he can't sense anything out of the ordinary. Finally, he says, that's it. I gotta come clean if I want to find out what's going on. So he goes over to Psachia and he says to him, tell me, what is it about your blessings that you're giving to people that they're coming true? And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, no, seriously, what did you do? He says, I didn't do anything. I don't know. People ask me for a blessing, I give them a blessing. I have no idea if it's going to come true or not. He didn't let up. And he finally said to him, he said, tell me, when did this whole blessing business start? Can you remember what happened? See, Psachia is thinking and thinking and says, actually, I do remember. And he says, what happened was my business was not always so successful. In fact, we could hardly make ends meet. People were not stopping by. People that did stop by were bought on credit and never paid. And things were going from bad to worse. And finally, my wife had enough. And she said to me, Psachia, go into town, find an investor, find a partner to help you invest in the business, and then hopefully we'll be successful. So he agreed. He says, and on my way walking into town, I'm walking and I'm thinking, and I had a brilliant plan. What better partner could there be for me than Hashem? So I stopped and I turned to Hashem and I said, Hashem, listen, let's be partners. I'm going to take you into my business. You agree to bless my business, and 50%, it's going to be 50-50. 50% of my business I will give to you, and 50% I will keep to my family. And he says, and that's why I have this thing in the wall. Behind it, I put a safe with 2 compartments. And every time someone pays me, half goes to Hashem and half goes to the family. What does this mean? It means when we show Hashem this simple, simple, simple trust, Hashem is ready to pour the blessings down. We just have to make a receptacle. This guy had no hesitations. He was certain Hashem was going to be his business partner. And so that's what happened. Hashem responded in kind. And the concept in Chassidus is called kamayim al panim and panim. There's a reflective thing going on here of how we present ourselves to Hashem. That's how Hashem presents himself back to us. And we have to prepare these vessels in terms of very, very simple terms that we can all understand in terms of a career or employment. Now, we know as a Jew, we've been exposed to these terms before, two different terms, emunah and bitachon, faith and trust. What's the difference? So Nachmanides proposes, and Nachmanides says that all who trust believe, but not all who believe trust. And he gives an example of a tree. He said, faith is like the tree, and fruit is like the trust, bitachon, because the fruit is proof positive that there is a tree. A person that trusts, you know he believes. But there could be a fully grown tree that doesn't bear fruit. There could be somebody that has complete faith, but is missing this element of trust. So let's dissect faith and trust and see where the nuance is. What is the difference? So the very first difference we know between faith and trust is faith is I know that everything comes from Hashem. And when I put my best foot forward and when I'm trying my hardest, I know that success is going to come from Hashem. It's not going to come from me. It's not going to come from my business contact. It's going to come from Hashem. Trust is an absolute certainty that Hashem will make it successful. You understand the difference? Faith is I know the success is up to Hashem. Trust is for sure Hashem is going to make sure I succeed. The second difference is that faith can stay detached from reality. And trust is something that has bearing on the very actions that I do. For instance, take a thief. A thief knows he's not acting in a godly way. But the entire time he's robbing that bank or that person or that store, he's praying to God to be successful. So he knows there's a God. He knows that God is watching him. And he knows that he needs God's help. But there's a certain detachment there. If he would trust in Hashem, then he wouldn't resort to such activity. So a thief could have faith, but a thief would never have trust. The third distinction is that faith tells us that everything is ultimately good. If Hashem's doing it, it's good. That's it. Trust takes it again to the next level. Trust says it's going to be good in a way that I'm going to understand. And that's why so often when you heard the Rebbe give a blessing, the Rebbe would add the words, B'toiv hanire v'hanigla. It should be in an open and revealed way. When a person trusts, they trust that the good that Hashem is going to shower on them is going to be in a way that they understand. Not that they have to have faith that God knows it's good, so it must be good. The fourth difference is that faith is that baseline constant. Think about, it's probably not the best scientific example, but think about like your heartbeat. Your heartbeat is a constant. You're not always aware that it's there and it keeps you alive and it's just there. Faith is that constant. When a person feels threatened, their adrenaline kicks in. It's not always there. If we were always going on adrenaline, it would be a big problem. That's why some people take medication to kind of tone down that adrenaline if they have it in overabundance, right? So faith is like that baseline. It's always an undercurrent of our reality. Trust is ignited and awakened and kicks in primarily when there is a challenge. Now, what's the difference between trust and hope? Tikva and bitachon, what's the difference? Hope is that little glimmer, that glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, that sound of a motor that you hear after you put out a SOS when you're lost in the fire, in the forest. Hope is maybe there's a way out. Trust is when there is no way out. I'm stuck. There is no hope. There is nothing that could save me, but I still trust. I trust in Hashem. There's an interesting explanation from the words of King David. A lot of you may know it from a song. You may recognize the words. King David says, Esai einai el harim, I raise my eyes up to the hills. Me'ayin yavo Ezri, from where will my help come from? Ezri me'im Hashem, my help will come from God. Oiseh shemayim va'aretz, that created heaven and earth. Hasidic masters say, if you look at the Hebrew word, the word me'ayin could be translated as from where, but we also know that the world was created yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. So the word ayin also means nothing. What King David was saying is, nothing could save me now. Nothing. I'm a dead man. My only salvation can be Hashem. Difference between hope, difference between trust. With hope, even if there's that glimmer, even if there's that hum of an engine, there's no guarantee we're going to be saved. We're hoping we will. We're hoping it's going to work out. But with trust, it's a guarantee. For sure. We're certain. The main feature of trust we're going to see as we go into this work is the calm that it provides us as a person and as a Jew living in this world. Let's look at the word bitachon. It's a derivative of the word betach. You ever talk to an Israeli and you ask them a question? And you say, are you going to come to services Yom Kippur? Betach, of course, for sure. Right? Betach means, we say it at the end of grace after meals. Right? Baruch HaGever Asher Yiftach B'Hashem. Blessed is the man that trusts in Hashem. Betach means certainty. So not only do we believe that Hashem can provide and protect us, but we're certain that he will. There's another part to the word bitachon. The last two letters. The last two letters are a tes and a ches. And it's the root word of tach, meaning to plaster. Excuse me one second. Plaster is a bonding agent. In social terms, we talk about cementing a relationship, right? The greater the bond, the greater the friendship, and the greater the trust, because each person knows the other has their best interest at heart. There's a bond there. There's a trust there. So that word bitachon takes in both of those elements. It's like the story, which I'm sure you've heard told many times, of the little boy and the whole village is waiting for the ship to come to the shore, and it was supposed to arrive, and they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and there's no sign of the ship. And the person that operates the lighthouse goes to the top of the lighthouse and looks out far at sea and does not see the boat coming. And they all give up and they all leave, except for one little boy stands up as high as he can, and he's waving a lantern to be able to signal the incoming ship that nobody else can see. And they ask him, why are you waving your lantern? It's not coming. He says, of course he's coming. The captain promised he's coming today. And the people say, we know he promised, but he's not. We looked on the horizon and the ship is nowhere to be seen. And the boy looks at them and says, I know the ship is coming because the captain is my father. My father said he's coming. he's coming. There's nothing that could break that trust. The same is true with Hashem. When our bond is so powerful, it makes like a plastered bonding agent that keeps us together and unites us. And then we're so certain that God is going to do whatever that's in his power. And remember, God's power is infinite for our ultimate good. And that we ourselves are going to see positive results. And when we give up our worries and our fears and say, we trust you, Hashem, just guide us. This sounds like utopia, right? It sounds beautiful. It's a lot easier said than done. Hashem is not readily apparent in our everyday life. We believe everything exists because of him. We know that he cares about us. We know he controls everything, but there's a huge clash between that belief system and the reality of the world we live in. I don't have to tell you, we see stuff every day. I'll never forget, we were sitting Shiva for my father, and one of the kids asked a question, if they were allowed to do something, if it jived with the observance of Shiva. And one of my uncles said, no, you're not allowed to do it. So somebody else piped up, who do you think you are, God? So my uncle says, yeah. She says, leave. We don't like you here. What does that mean? We're a family, an observant Jewish family, right? Do we not believe in God? Of course we believe in God. But the reality of what we were going through made it hard to internalize that this is something that Hashem really wanted to happen. We were like, nah, you're God, get out of here. We're not on good terms right now. So genuine trust really requires tremendous, tremendous effort. It's a lifelong exercise. And basically, there's essentially two parts to it. The first one is we have to train ourselves to believe deeply that everything that happens to us is for our good, despite our limited, and we have to acknowledge that it's limited, perception of that goodness. And the second piece is we also trust implicitly, and this is even the harder part, that it will be good in a way that we can appreciate. So this means not only do we put aside our own instincts and our human perspective, but our egos too. Everything goes out the window, and we just leave everything up to Hashem completely. But how? How do we do that? Those are two monumental expectations. Simply, you got to be determined, and you got to train like any other skill. And Hasidus explains that it's not just determination and training, but we actually have it within us, that each one of us have that natural spark of bitachon embedded inside of us. It's part of who we are. We each have a neshama. A neshama is a soul, which is a chelak elokah mimal mamash, is an actual piece of Hashem. And we have that soul embedded in us. The work of bitachon is just getting in touch with that spark, tapping into it, and fueling it with more bitachon. And then God responds, reflecting back in kind. When we wake up our essence, he reveals his. Meaning, there are rules of nature that God put into place to make the world operate. This means that Hashem's involvement is obscure. The infinite power of Hashem and the unlimited scope of Hashem is limited but to our own understanding. But when we dig deep into our essence, Hashem, so to speak, responds in kind, digs deep into his essence, overrides the laws of nature without changing the whole world and could deliver the impossible. This is Hashem's response to our faith in him. When we work to reveal his essence within us by having that trust, the effect is immediate, and Hashem responds by showing us his real essence. Baal Shem Tov once went to try to learn what Bitachon was. And he was told to go to a home of a specific innkeeper to learn what it means to have true trust, true Bitachon in Hashem. And he goes to this innkeeper's house, and at first glance, there's nothing different. Nice, jolly fellow, greets them at the door, sits them down, serves them, and he's conversing with them, and he's in a good mood. All of a sudden, a very official-looking person walks into the inn, and he's carrying a long stick, and he raps on the desk once and leaves. Okay, odd, but whatever. A little while later, the scene repeats itself. The official-looking person comes in, walks over to the desk, takes out his stick, raps twice, doesn't say a word, and leaves. At this point, the Baal Shem Tov and his entourage are a little bit curious, and they ask the innkeeper, what's going on? What is this? So he's smiling and he says, that's the rent collector. Once a year, I have to pay rent for this inn to the local landowner, the parrots, and today is rent day, today's payday. So when he came in the first time and he rapped on the desk, that was the first warning. When he came in the second time and he rapped twice, that was the third warning. That was the second warning. So the Baal Shem Tov says, why don't you pay him? Stop busying yourself with us. We can wait. Go pay the guy. Like, what are you waiting for? So he says, and I'm paying because I don't have the money. I don't even have 1 cent to give the guy. And he carries on serving them, giving them food. And they say, what's your plan? He says, Hashem's going to help. Clearly unfazed. Hashem's going to help. Don't worry about it. One of the people in the Baal Shem Tov's group says, what happens when the guy comes back a third time? He says, well, if I don't pay the rent, then I get arrested. And my whole family gets thrown in prison until the community ransoms us out. And, that's the way it goes. The party goes on. The chassid is completely unfazed. He's saying Hashem's going to help. No problem. The official comes back, raps 3 times, and leaves. Chassid stops what he's doing, goes to the back, puts on his Shabbos clothes, and gets his hat and his walking stick, and he's ready to go. And so he's whistling a happy tune, and the Chassidim say, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to pay the rent. And they say, oh, good, you found the money? You have money? And he says, nope, not a penny. And they're astounded. They say, what do you mean you're going to pay the rent? He says, Hashem's going to help. Okay. The guy leaves, and they're watching. They're watching him walk, and he's walking and walking. All of a sudden, they see in the distance, there's a carriage coming towards the innkeeper. The carriage stops. There's some sort of interaction between the two. The chassid continues walking. The carriage comes towards the inn. A couple paces later, the carriage makes an abrupt turnaround, goes back, catches up to the chassid. You see an exchange of a pouch. The chassid goes on his way. The carriage turns around, comes back to the inn. The carriage arrives at the inn. Businessman comes out, and he's immediately surrounded by the Baal Shem Tov and his whole entourage. And they say, excuse me, could you please explain to us what that interaction was with the innkeeper over there? And he says, sure. This innkeeper makes amazing whiskey. I wanted to come and make a deal. I wanted to buy his entire stock of whiskey. And he named a price, a ridiculous price. He wanted the rent for this hole in the wall for the rest of the year. So I told him, go fly a kite, not happening. And I drove away. He says, and after I drove away, I said to myself, 1 second, I'm dealing with this guy for years already. He's a trustworthy man. If that's the price he's giving me, it must be really good whiskey. So I turned around and I gave him the full amount that he asked for. Shem Tov said, this is Bitachon. The guy was certain Hashem was going to come through. He did his part. He was running his business. He was doing what he had to do. And his belief was so complete. It wasn't just lip service. He was not fazed. When he left the inn without a penny in his pocket, he was completely sure that Hashem was going to come through for him. So how does this bitachon function? What is the spiritual mechanism that makes this bitachon work? How does it operate? Let's try to understand it before we learn how to get it. So Hasidus offers a Kabbalistic insight into the mechanism of bitachon. Okay, so bear with me for a minute. We're going to go on a little Kabbalistic journey. If there's a question, stop me or write it in the chat, and we'll try to address it in a timely fashion. So God is infinite. Anything we consider as existing is by definition finite, right? No matter what. God allowed for the creation of spiritual and physical things in our world through a process called tzimtzum. Maybe familiar to some of you, maybe first time for many of you that you've heard this term tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means contraction. Basically, God's infinite light contracts itself through a series of concealments until it reaches our world. Think of it like I'm in the market for a window covering now. And if I tell you the options are endless. The guy comes from the store with his sample full of blinds, and he has a roller shade that's thick, and he has a sheer shade that you could see completely through, and he has a honeycomb shade that you can see shadows, and he has a blackout shade that you don't see anything. Each of these are real options for which I can cover my window. And depending on the one I choose, that's how much of the sun is going to be allowed into my room. But just because I choose a blackout shade, that doesn't change the strength of the sun. It's the filter that's changing. If I choose to leave it uncovered, I'm going to get the full unfiltered light of the sun. If I choose a sheer covering, I'll get it a little bit. And if I choose the blackout shade, I'm not going to get anything. And so everything in our world is here through the series of contractions of Hashem's light. And each contraction is like, if you think of those shades, I know it's a very silly example, each contraction conceals the divinity a little bit more. And then in each reality, there's a new divine energy that then gets contracted and goes into the next world. And in Hasidus or in Kabbalah, this is called Seder Hishtalshelus, where God's infinite light is at the top, and through a series of contractions, creating new realities, we come down to a chain of creation and existence. And there are many, many, many of these contractions. But Kabbalah boils it down to 4 cosmos, or 4 worlds. The first world that we experience this divine energy is Atzilus. And I'm sure you've heard of it. I see Mona nodding. Atzilus, Atzilus is this, in this realm, everything is utterly good and perfect and godly and pristine. It is so pure that this creation, even though Hashem contracted his light a little bit to create Atzilos, it's so pristine, it cannot even sense its own existence. There's no room for anything other than godliness. And through a chain of more contractions of Hashem's light, we come to the second world, which is called Bria. In this world, in this cosmos, there's an element of creation on some level. There's the first possibility that exists of something other than revealed godliness. However, in this realm, even though the creations in this realm are aware of themselves as a separate creation, they recognize their utter dependence and reliance on Hashem. It is not ambiguous. It is clear as day. They view themselves as separate, but completely dependent on Hashem, and his strength is completely tangible in this world. The third world is referred to as the world of Yetzirah, formation. And this is the first place where evil emerges in some form. In fact, Kabbalah describes it, in this world, the good and evil are 50-50. There's just the same amount of evil as there is complete godliness that's available and tangible and clear for, I don't want to say people because it's a whole nother realm of creations to experience. And then finally, we get to the fourth world, so to speak, which is the world of Asiya, which is our world. We're in complete contrast to Atzilos, the first one, where God's divinity is just there for the taking. In our world, instead of the existence of God being an absolute, it is completely obscured. It's hidden. And in order to experience a godly moment, it requires tremendous, tremendous effort. But we're taught that all those contractions exist only for our world, only so that we could struggle with that reality. So we could struggle with an existence that denies Hashem's godliness and divinity and conceals his goodness. And we're going to read more about this when we go into the work. So now we understand that at the core of everything that we experience in our world, everything is good. Why? Because every single thing that comes into existence, into our world, anything we see, taste, hear, experience, comes through this filtration system. So that means at its core, when it's starting way up at the top, it's completely good and holy. Sometimes in its journey down to us, it gets hazy and obscured by the time it comes into our reality. And sometimes when that blessing lands in our lap, it comes in the most negative, ugly package. But it is goodness if we remember the source. It could appear and it could feel as negative, bad, or even a calamity or a tragedy by the time it gets filtered down to us. But when we really think about the path that it took to get here, we remember its source. It started off in Atzilus. So it makes sense that when an abundance of divine light is poured in through this system, it could be too intense for the limitations of the next realm. And so it gets pushback. And that pushback causes for that good thing to be further disguised. Now, it's important to remember that God could override this system whenever he wants. When that happens, God's open and revealed goodness is felt, and it's tangible, and we could appreciate this is God's blessing. And we say, this was an open miracle. This was the hand of God. And what's the key to overriding the system? That's what we're going to learn about. That key is bitachon. It's specifically through trust that we proactively trigger such a reaction. When we face a hardship and we choose, and it's a choice, and we choose to respond with firm bitachon, with complete, real trust, we're advancing our bond with Hashem, and we're causing him to bypass that spiritual system. Think about a story we all grew up with, the splitting of the sea. What happened? We as a nation come to the sea. Hashem says, go. And right away, people are thinking of alternatives. Some say to pray, some say to give up, some say to go back. One guy activated his bitachon, one, Nachshon ben Aminadab. And he said, God said, go, I'm going. There's an ocean in my way? Who cares? That's not going to stop me. God said, go. I'm trusting God. My human brain tells me there's a sea and I'm going to drown. Irrelevant. And we know what happens. He goes and the water reaches up to his neck and then the sea splits. So this bitachon means we have an awareness that what we're experiencing here started in Atzilos and is really and truly good. And we trust that what we're seeing here in this world as a negative is really just a facade. And the essence is good. And when we activate that and believe that, so Hashem's response is to let the facade fall away. And he loosens the grip on the contractions, so to speak, and lets the good just come down unfiltered. This understanding helps and adds our ability to trust. It's still a work. It's still something we have to accomplish and get to. But this little piece of information, understanding the mechanism of bitachon, helps in our ability to trust. So when we're faced with a dilemma, when we're faced with a negative experience, a bad diagnosis, a terrible illness, we accept that this is what Hashem wants and that everything Hashem is good. Everything Hashem does is good. This is emunah. This is faith. Hashem wants me to deal with this right now. But simultaneously, we can and should trust absolutely that Hashem is the absolute power and authority, and he could turn everything on its head, turn the tables, and we could have a completely different outcome. This is emunah and bitachon working hand in hand. Yes, I accept this is God's will. This didn't just happen to me. There's no why me. Hashem wants this to happen, and there's a level of acceptance that comes with that. But at the same time, we could activate the bitachon piece that knows that Hashem can and will pull us out of it. We know that Hashem wanted to be in this world, and the words that we're told are that he wanted to have a dwelling place in our world, in this world of Asiya, far away from Atzilos. What does it mean to be at home? One of the reasons why I love Zoom is I can be at home. I can sit relaxed in my favorite chair. I can have my cup of tea. I can be myself. I'm home. Ultimately, Hashem wants to express his real self in our world. That self that's unfiltered and unencumbered and not contracted. And how do we help reveal that part of Hashem in our world? By using this Bitachon tool. By using this Bitachon tool, we activate it and we cause Hashem to be able to release the contractions and express himself as he really and truly wants to. But it needs to come from us. When we're challenged with something, we're not scared off by it. We know there's a purpose. Hashem wants it to happen. It's a good purpose. And we also know its limits. We know we have a supercharged connection to Hashem, and Hashem could override all of it. And even if after all of this, Hashem chooses to remain concealed and hidden, we're still not going to be fazed. Why? Because with Bitachon, we know with certainty that Hashem is calling the shots, and we trust him completely. So there's two things here. We activate that trust. We know the source of everything is completely pristine and good and godly. And when we have that trust and we dig down and reveal that essence, Hashem in turn reveals his essence. But even if after all that, we still are faced with a situation where we didn't see the sea split and we didn't see the miraculous cure, we still don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We still know we're not fazed. We still know Hashem is in charge, and I completely put my life in his hands and I completely trust him. And with this, we're ready now with this framework and this understanding of how things come into this world, into existence. Now we can go into this work of Chovas HaLevavos, duties of the heart, and examine what it means to have this trust that we're talking about. What are practical ways to gain this trust? And how do we know that we got it? But we all have to know that this is a lifelong journey. This is not a one and done. This is something that we train at, we're disciplined with, we work at. But the most beautiful thing is that when we learn how to exercise it properly, just by the way that Hashem constructed the world, if we exercise this bitachon piece the way it should be, we will merit to see pure, unadulterated, unfiltered goodness from Hashem in our lives. And with that, I will open up to any questions or comments. I know some of you are on a tight schedule, so the class is officially over and we'll see you November 2nd. If anybody has a question that they want to ask, please unmute yourself and I'll do my best. I'm going to stop the recording. I'll do my best to answer.